Have you ever been in a school lockdown? The silence, the uncertainty, the feeling that something is terribly wrong just outside the classroom door. It's an experience that stays with you. Today, we're diving into 3 true, creepy lockdown stories from students who lived through them. These aren't just drills. They're moments when fear became all too real. Our first story comes from a user named Alex, who is a high school senior in a small town in Oregon. It was a Tuesday afternoon, just after lunch. Suddenly, the principal's voice came over the intercom, shaky and rushed. "Teachers, initiate lockdown procedures. This is not a drill." The students exchanged nervous glances as their teacher, Mr. Harrison, locked the door and covered the window. They huddled in the corner, away from sight. Minutes stretched into what felt like an eternity. All they could hear was the frantic beating of their own hearts and the hum of the classroom projector. Then, a new sound. A slow, deliberate tapping on the classroom door. Tap, 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 tap. It wasn't the sound of a fist, but more like a single finger. The students froze. Mr. Harrison put a finger to his lips, his face pale. The tapping continued, moving along the door as if someone was feeling their way in the dark. A soft voice whispered, "Let me in. It's cold out here." It sounded like a child, but no one recognized the voice. Alex remembers the hair on his arms standing straight up. Why would a child be wandering the halls during a real lockdown? The tapping stopped. A few seconds later, they heard it again. This time on the window in the door, the one covered by black paper. Tap, tap, the whisper came again. Louder this time. "I know you're in there." The tension in the room was unbearable. A girl started crying silently, her shoulders shaking. Mr. Harrison, a former Marine, stood protectively in front of them, holding a heavy textbook like a weapon. The tapping and whispering went on for what felt like forever, sometimes at the door, sometimes at the window. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The hallway fell silent again. About 20 minutes later, the all-clear was given. The official story was that a non-custodial parent had tried to gain access to the school, triggering the alarm. But no one could explain the child's voice or the eerie tapping. The school security footage of that hallway mysteriously showed nothing but an empty corridor for the entire duration of the lockdown. The students in that class never forgot the voice that begged to be let in. Next, we head to a middle school in suburban Illinois. This story was shared by Jenna, who was in 7th grade. Her lockdown experience happened on the last day before winter break. The school was buzzing with excitement, but it all came to a halt when the lockdown alarm blared. Jenna's class was in the library, a large open space with huge windows looking out onto the school's main courtyard. The librarians hurried them into a back storage room, a cramped space filled with old books and dusty shelves. It was dark, stuffy, and smelled like old paper. They sat in the dark, listening. At first, there was nothing. Then they heard shouting from outside, far away. Sirens wailed in the distance. Jenna and her friends were huddled together, trying to stay calm. That's when one of the students, a boy named Mike, pointed to a small, high window in the storage room. It was a tiny rectangular pane of glass that looked out onto a secluded part of the school grounds near the woods. And standing there, just outside the window, was a person. But it wasn't a person they recognized. It was someone wearing a full-body animal costume, like a mascot, but it wasn't the school's mascot. It was a worn, slightly unsettling-looking rabbit costume with large, vacant eyes. The rabbit figure just stood there, motionless, staring directly at their small window. It didn't move, it didn't wave, it just stared. The creepiest part. Everyone knew that part of the school was a dead end, fenced off from the surrounding woods. There was no reason for anyone to be there. The students were too scared to make a sound. They watched the rabbit for what must have been 10 minutes. Its head tilted slightly to the side, as if it was listening. Then, Slowly, it raised one of its gloved hands and waved. Not a friendly wave, but a slow, deliberate, almost mocking gesture. Then it turned and walked back towards the woods, disappearing behind the trees. When the lockdown ended, the police said the alarm was triggered by a report of a suspicious person near the school, but they found no one. Jenna and her classmates told their teacher about the rabbit, but they were dismissed. The adults thought it was just their overactive imaginations, fueled by fear. But every student in that storage room saw it. They never found out who was in the costume or why they were there. For Jenna, the image of that silent, staring rabbit is more terrifying than any monster she's ever seen in a movie. It was the complete randomness of it, the surreal and bizarre sight in the middle of a real-life emergency that made it so deeply disturbing. Our final story takes us to a university campus in California. This was submitted by David, a college sophomore who was living in the dorms. One night, around 2 a.m., the campus-wide emergency alert system went off. Phones buzzed with a text: "Shelter in place, active threat on campus. Lock all doors and windows. Await further instruction." They immediately locked their door and turned off the lights, peering through the blinds of their window, which overlooked a central quad. The campus, usually dotted with late-night studiers, was eerily empty. Police cars, lights flashing but sirens off, were creeping around the perimeter. For about an hour, nothing happened. Just silence and the flashing blue and red lights painting their walls. David was scrolling through social media, trying to find any information. Rumors were flying, everything from a robbery to something far worse. Then, Mark grabbed his arm. "Dude, look." On the third floor, a window was lit up, and in that window, they could see a silhouette. Someone was standing there, perfectly still, looking out. This alone wasn't strange. It was probably another student, just as scared as they were. But then, the figure started to move. It wasn't pacing or looking around, it was dancing. A slow, strange, almost balletic dance. Its arms moved in fluid, unnatural ways, and its body swayed rhythmically in the window frame. It was a completely bizarre and unsettling sight against the backdrop of a serious campus threat. David and Mark watched, mesmerized and terrified. Who would be dancing during a lockdown? The dance continued for at least 20 minutes. The silhouette would bend and twist, sometimes disappearing from view only to reappear a moment later, its movements growing more erratic. At one point, it pressed its hands against the glass, then its face, its features obscured by the distance and the light behind it. It felt like they were watching a private, insane performance meant only for them. Then, just as the police gave the all-clear via another text alert, the light in the opposite window flicked off. The figure was gone. The official report later stated that the threat was a false alarm, a mistaken report. But David could never shake the image of the dancing silhouette. He never found out who lived in that room, and he never saw the figure again. It was a moment of pure, inexplicable creepiness, a surreal human element in the middle of a technological, impersonal alert. 3 schools, 3 lockdowns, 3 stories that go beyond the procedure and into the realm of the truly strange and unsettling. These events remind us that sometimes the scariest things aren't the threats we can explain, but the ones we can't. The whispers in the hall, the silent watchers, the dancers in the night. What's the creepiest thing you've ever experienced at school? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. Stay safe out there.